I really love Victor Vran. It's such a good quality, over-the-top action RPG. You know, a Diablo 3 type of game, a Torchlight type of game. It's really awesome because it has great controls, it's responsive, and it has a pretty high caliber of difficulty where the game gets really challenging about halfway through. Although sometimes it is still pretty easy, but most of the time the game is challenging, and I love that in an over-the-top action RPG, especially one where the controls are really smooth and responsive, because when the controls are good in a game of this type, you will succeed as long as you play smart, no matter how hard the difficulty of the game is. I think my favorite part of this game is it's different from a lot of other over-the-top action RPGs of this type, you know, dungeon crawling action RPGs. It's not different by anything you would see from gameplay. It's something you really have to explain. You look at the game and it's just like a Torchlight Diablo clone, nothing special or spectacular. It looks identical to those games, and in most of the ways it is, like in the I guess combat and the gameplay it is, and in the type of moves you have it is. But where it's different is you make your own character classes basically just by the type of weapons you have. I mean, there's a lot of customization. You have like these cards that customize the kind of special abilities your character has. You can customize what kind of things you can use, like what kind of special items you use in combat. But really what makes your character a specific class is the type of weapons you use. This can be broken down into ranged weapons and melee weapons, like rapiers, swords, hammers, and the ranged weapons are more like electrical guns, shotguns, mortars, just anything you shoot from far away. But it's so much more complicated than that, because even the ranged and melee weapons, they're so different from one another. Every single weapon feels like a different class. Like when you use a rapier, you have all these different special attacks with it, but you also move differently. You have a different rhythm than when you're using like a hammer or when you're using a sword. You're pretty much a different class, even when you're using different types of swords and melee weapons. And it's pretty much the same thing with ranged attacks. Like if you're using a shotgun, you're completely different. It's a completely different playstyle to when you're using like a mortar, when you're shooting like grenades or multiple grenades at enemies. And then when you're using one of these electrical guns that shoot like this wave of Tesla electricity, it's completely different from a regular gun or shotgun. It's just a completely different playstyle. There's a lot of different micro builds just based on the type of weapon you use. And this all gets much more complicated because later on in the game, you can't really just stay as a specific type of character. You can't just be a guy that uses shotgun. You have to switch it up with your secondary weapon. Sometimes an enemy or like a group of enemies is so complicated to defeat, so hard to defeat, you can't just keep perpetually shooting a shotgun. You need to switch off to your secondary weapon, a melee weapon, because some of the enemies in the group just don't respond very well to shotgun attacks. You need to stab them at close range with a rapier or just smash them with a hammer. You have to, like halfway through the game or the later portions of the game, you have to switch it up between the different weapon types you use to really be good at the game and to really defeat the game. And then the later stages, like the last boss, the last few types of bosses, they're just ridiculously hard in some of the harder difficulties. So it's absolutely imperative not just to switch up the weapons, but to have a really good strategy, to have a comprehensive strategy where you know how the enemy moves and behaves and you avoid the enemy attacks. Because even if you have like the strongest armor, even if you look like the Tin Man, if you're wearing like that really strong suit that protects you from enemy attacks, you will still get a ton of your life siphoned because the enemies hit incredibly hard later on in the game. You have to avoid enemy attacks. That's pretty much the best defense. Not the type of armor you have, but how good you are at running away and dodging enemy attacks. And these are really the best parts of the game. Everything else is pretty much standard tier. The graphics, good, not amazing, not next gen, not like innovative, nothing special, just good. The story, pretty good, and it involves vampires and demons and like a man trying to redeem himself and other people trying to redeem himself. It's told through like this collage of pictures, so there's no like really moving CGI in the story parts, but it's cool because they're drawn very well and the women are absolutely scrumptious. I mean, really sexy pictures. The combat is really the meat and potatoes of this game, and that's where this game stands out, and really that's the most important thing for me in over-the-top action RPG dungeon crawlers of this type. Everything else, like the graphics could be PS2 level graphics. The story could be ridiculously stupid. The sound effects and the music could be non-existent in the game, and I would still like this game just because of how comprehensive and good the actual gameplay and combat is. Overall, Victor Ran is just a really good game if you're a fan of over-the-top action RPGs. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more game reviews. Goodbye, my friends.